when the Cattle Sanitary Board of Arizona authorized the employment of a veterinarian for the growing livestock industry. They were advised to go to Detroit, Michigan, to meet with a successful young Canadian by the name of Dr. J Chandler. Now, back in 1887, the territory of Arizona looked a lot different. Prescott was the state's capital. The route to Phoenix was a narrow dirt road through the Black Canyon, and Chandler, as we know it today, hadn't even been thought of. When Dr. J Chandler made that trek and landed in Mesa, it took him 3 weeks to decide to stay in Arizona, not to look after sick cattle, but to bring water to the desert.
When Dr. Chandler found a town, he envisioned a resort community with a resort hotel like the San Marcos, surrounded by businesses around a center core, and then the surrounding outside areas being industrial agriculture, a place where people could earn money growing various kinds of cash crops.
The city of Chandler, the core, we consider downtown now. And then you see agricultural fields all the way around. The area grew melons and lettuce and cotton and alfalfa, citrus.
Land sale day was May 16th, 1912, and they sold $50,000 of property that single day in downtown Chandler.
1912 was a big year. Arizona was admitted to the Union as the 48th state. Fenway Park hosted its first MLB game. The Titanic set sail and sunk. The women's suffrage vote was passed in Arizona, and the town of Chandler was established.
People came from all over the country to invest in the property. The San Marcos was finished in 1913. It was growing and it was going very, very well until in the 20s, cotton prices crashed, and that was one of the main cash crops. Lots of families lost or chose to leave Chandler, and Chandler actually shrank in the 1920s and became much more of a standard sort of agricultural town at that point. As the Depression gets worse and worse, one of the main focuses of Chandler still at that time was the San Marcos. We also start to see what is known as Dust Bowl migrants. So some of the farmers here started hiring these migrants. Many of the original black families that were here are part of that great migration that were coming to Arizona and to Chandler specifically looking for a better life.
The only way to really open that up, when you talk about my family, the Woods family and the Harris family, my dad's father, Billy Woods, he brought many, many people here. Back then, Chandler was very popular for the agricultural side of things, and my grandfather was a contractor for the cotton fields. It's crazy because everybody in Mesa referred to this area as the Dust Bowl. Why? Because we had nothing but dirt roads.
It was 1 square mile, and it was basically Chandler Boulevard, which at the time was known as Cleveland Street, down to Fry. Then as soon as you got outside of that, there'd just be big, huge expanses of farm fields, because many of the farmers didn't just own 10 acres. They'd own 600 or 1,000 acres.
To see Walmart sitting at the corner where I used to walk the rows of the cotton field, and my dad used to always walk through the house and say, "Hey, get up, let's move them, let's shake them, gotta beat the heat." I didn't want to hear that. Beat the heat, let the heat come and let me lay. But everybody in the family had to do it because it was about making the bucks and providing for the family. You know, I didn't realize we were poor. My parents never showed me that we were poor. For that reason, we went to the fields. My Harris side of the family, N.J. Harris, he was the chauffeur for Dr. Chandler. It was always a fun topic because they always said, "Oh, Gramps was the first man in Chandler," since he was in the front seat. He came over and he built his barbecue restaurant, Harris Barbecue, out of the city's first retired water tank. Harris acquired a number of properties in this area. And in doing that, he divvied a few of them up. My mom and my dad built on this property of which we're standing right now. This was Harris property. And so it's like the hub of the family now.
Hispanic folks came up from Mexico, but also lived in the area and were just naturally farm workers that had been farming the fields of this area for a long time. One thing that is really unique and wonderful about Southside is that There are several families that have lived there for multiple generations. The churches were incredibly important as a place for families to come together and connect.
En mi vida entera,
The church has really been my entire life. I've lived here most of my life. My family has lived there most of my life. And for a long time, it was the church for South Chandler. But now we really want to be the church that cares for Chandler as a whole. We want to provide for the community in its entirety.
llegamos por accidente.
We came here by accident. We were here to spend just a few days on vacation, and we found that the pastor here was unable to pastor the church at the time, so those couple of days turned into 43 years.
Por 43 años. Era un pueblo muy pequeño.
Chandler was very small. When I first got here, I thought I came to a cowboy town. I got up in the morning, I thought that there was going to be people on horseback, and that wasn't the case.
No era tal cosa.
Technology had sort of changed the way farming worked. And so as the town leaders started to discuss it, they were like, well, how can we become a modern town? How can we ensure that we have a future of different industries? What if we could bring some of these high-tech companies to Chandler?
Rogers Corporation, which was a Connecticut-based firm, decided to establish a presence here in Chandler to manufacture circuit boards. And that was really the first high-tech business that located to Chandler. And they planted the flag for high-tech.
So Intel is really this industry leader for semiconductors and chips. As computers become more common, and then as Chandler started to grow, the workforce really supported that.
So Intel and Chandler have really grown up together, both of us contributing to each other, I think, along the way. Back then, it was farmland. I remember I graduated from Arizona State University and came out for my interview, and it seemed like I drove and drove and drove forever, passing farm fields along the way. It was a place that had a lot of growth opportunity. We had major universities close by, we had a lot of resources, and now it's a bustling city with a lot of high tech and a lot of opportunities for companies as well as for families.
It was a shock for both communities, right? It was a shock for the Intel workers that came from California because they were coming to farm fields. In the meantime, people from Chandler didn't understand what this company was going to be. The city leaders really had this notion of we have to change as a community if we're going to stay viable, grow, and continue to succeed in the future.
The openness to trying new things has been a key thing that I think Chandler had before. If you think about it, it was more of a smaller town, a farming community, and they were still open to high tech. Chandler has changed Intel, and Intel has changed Chandler. I would never have imagined where we are today when I think about when I first started 30 plus years ago. I think there's growth in areas that I couldn't even think about. And I think Intel believes in Chandler, and it'll continue to invest in the people, the community, the natural resources that we have. So it'll continue to grow and to morph and to be better and better as the years go on.
En lo particular, yo he visto el crecimiento de la ciudad de una forma grande.
I've seen tremendous growth in Chandler. I've seen it in just a decade, it grow in amazing proportions. One of the most amazing things for me, and one of the things that I'm most appreciative about, is that as they were planning the city, they did a great job for the growth.
Dr. Chandler was an innovator who was inspired by opportunity. He created this culture that other people started to see the same thing. They would get here and there's this innovation and opportunity. And the mixture of those two has created this constant community that's always refreshing, always thinking, always creating new ideas, right? That's innovation. That's opportunity.
You want to tell your children from whence they came. You want to keep the root that keeps it alive. And if you don't water that, that's a sad indictment for a beautiful bush. So that's how I feel about family. That's what I feel about Chandler. That's what I feel about everything that my grandfather did. He started a rose bush.